Good evening or good afternoon, Nyachangkuoth.
Good evening, Kwaji.
Yeah. Okay, just another thing is just be very cautious of the mic, because we had another podcast episode we recorded with someone, and they were doing this. They were doing tete. So the mic didn't capture their voice very well.
Oh.
It's nice to have you on the RecentPast podcast. Also, like it's such a delight that you are able to respond to us in a very swift time. You're someone who is, I always looked at with a lot of admirations, the nature of your work, the progression of what you've been doing. So I'll start probably for the sake of the audience, maybe you can just tell them what's your name and what you do.
Thank you, Nelson, and thank you also for hosting me in the RecentPast podcast. It's really a honor and a pleasure to be part of this podcast today. I am one of the people who is admiring how far you have come, and I remember meeting you in 2017 during the Gen Change Fellows. And my name is Nyachangkuoth Tai. I'm known for working mostly on gender-related issues as a gender analyst and also a South Sudanese.
Okay. I mean, you're talking about 2017 because that's when we met for the first time in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam.
Yes.
By the sea, because we had a fellowship program there.
Yes.
And most of the people who lead a lot of the staff, youth, especially in civil society and what, were in that meeting.
Yes. Was it White Sands?
Yeah.
Or what was the name of the hotel?
I can't recall, but something of that sort. But it was a very nice. It had a rural and kind of modern vibe.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember a lot of the Genovese were complaining, why are the beds so small? Why are we sharing rooms?
I was one of the Genovese. I was complaining about why the bed was small.
Yeah, the beds were too tiny, and then two people of the same gender shared the room. So it was just. I remember I shared a room with Ajing, who is now who does a lot of work in Turale.
I shared a room with Athie. Was it Athie or Ayi? The lady from Canada.
Yes.
The model.
Yes. I called her. I used to call her the Canadian.
She was my roommate.
Very also, I don't know why. I kept tabs with her until recently.
Yeah, me too. I tried several times, and we were in communication. I don't know. I think until 2018.
No, but that was kind of the league of leagues of who is who in that place. Because I remember you were there. I was there. We had Tatiana, who is...
We had Naomi
Alwell Atem.
Atong Malwal.
Yes.
We had...
Rich Malwal.
Yes.
Termanyang. who came dressed in a very nice suit on the beach.
Yes.
Termanyang. We had Kwanyingor.
Yes.
Engineer Kwany.
One of the most amazing fellows.
Very, very awesome gentleman. This lady Paula.
Paula Ito. An amazing person. We had Butrus.
Yes, Butrus. Arik.
Yes, Arik.
Yes, Arik Mawien. Yes. So many Agedo.
Yes, Agedo.
So many awesome people kind of who we met at that place. I think it's very nice to see. It's like 8 years later.
Yes.
Everyone ended up doing different things.
Different stuff.
Yeah. So you tell me a little bit about your upbringing and kind of what led you to probably do what you're doing now. Like, where were you born and what were you doing in your early years?
I grew up in a polygamous home. My dad had 4 wives. And my mom is number 4, the last. And we were 11, basically, the ones that are alive, 11 siblings.
To all the moms or to your mom alone?
To all the moms.
To all the moms.
6 girls and 5 boys. But we grew up in one house to an extent. We eat the same, we sleep on the same. There is no any special treatment because maybe you belong to a certain mother or your mother is number this and that. But also I grew up in most Junubin, these extended families, where you have relatives coming from the village, coming from different places, being raised with you, going to the same schools with you. So I grew up in I could say a packed environment whereby I had people around throughout my upbringing. And I think also what influenced the work that I do is seeing what my aunts were going through, my elder sisters, my female relatives basically. And growing up, I just knew that I want better for women. So the environment that you see, especially around equality, it's an environment that you are raised to, the typical home where you see some male members within the family feel like, women belong to the kitchen. But for the case of my dad was different because...
Where you guys grew up in which state?
In Shendi.
Shendi.
Yeah.
This is in Sudan, right?
In Sudan, yeah.
It's a bit of eastern Sudan, towards that side?
Not eastern, northern.
Not northern Sudan.
Yeah. River Nile State. Wilayat Nahr Nil. And yeah.
What took you guys to Shendi?
My dad was a military man. Yeah, he was part of Jesh. He was in Malakal throughout his studies until he sat. By then they call it Mutwasita. Has a
intermediate
Sudan certificate. Yeah, and then he went to Shendi as part of, his work duty station.
So were you guys in an Ishlak or in an army barrack? Or?
Funny enough, we grew up outside the army barrack.
But adjacent to it?
In Hilla, they call it Murabba Sitashar. This is where we grew up. It's not far from the Ishlak.
Yeah.
But we were living outside.
Outside there.
Yeah.
At which age did you realize that, probably the treatment of women or the treatment of girls was a bit different or unfair?
Funny enough, I could say from a tender age as primary school, we have cousins that come from the village. I remember there is a time my dad traveled somewhere and he got for us, some of these pajamas, where you wear trouser and yes. So we have cousins from the village who were a bit older than us. And I remember wearing my pajamas and I used to sit outside and I got a beating. That's why I might dress like a boy. And I was forced to change. And I went and wore normal jalabia like a woman. And it continued. It continued, growing up. Like you go to church, for example, you come back late, you get beating from these, male relatives. And in most cases, my dad's hands were a bit tight because these are his relatives.
Because as much as your dad could be a progressive, he cannot go against the relative because it's frowned upon, right?
Yeah, but what he was able to do is when he's around, they fear him. So there is no all these inequalities and mistreatment for women when he's around because they know he's going to take a stand. So they had a strategy as well. They wait for him to leave or go to work or
then
travel for a mission. Oh my God, we get beaten properly.
So, then, where did you go to kind of university and stuff like that?
I did my bachelor's at University, Barghazal University in Wow. I studied economics and social studies and specialized in rural development.
And so you got done with that. Where do you go from there?
From there, after graduation, I started now exploring professional opportunities. And the first job that I got was with UNIDO. Right now, it's called UNIDO. I was a peace officer in Unity States. And then after that, I joined World Vision International as a commodity tracking officer on livelihood and food security. And then after that, I joined the bank, KCB.
Yeah, because you were a banker. Which year did you join KCB?
I joined KCB 2010, 2011. Yes.
The KCB was like very big by then. It was the bank.
It was huge. Yeah. I joined in Bentiu, worked for like 1 year, got transferred to Juba. I worked in Buluk, and then they took me to the VIP section. They used to call it Advantage. Yeah, and I moved around different branches, Melekia, Munuki. The last branch where I was working was Melekia.
And which year did you leave the bank?
I left the bank that was after the conflict, after the 2013 conflict. Should be around 2015, 16. Yeah.
So
2015.
Yeah. Where did the 2013 conflict find you?
2013 conflict. It found me in Nairobi.
Wow.
I had an accident. I had a compound fracture, and I was in the hospital. I was given like a 6 months leave, sick leave. Yeah.
So you were there when the conflict erupted here?
I was in Nairobi, and it was worse. I wished I was inside.
Why?
Because most my family members were in Juba. My dad, by then also, he had a broken leg. He came to Juba. It was my brother's wedding. My brother's wedding was on the 23rd of November, was it? Or 23rd of November. And 3 weeks later, the conflict erupted, while all the family members, they came from different parts.
So
they came to Juba for the wedding. Yeah. So it was horrible.
Because the conflict had a bit of a very clear tribal dynamic, especially on the first few days.
Yeah.
You are a Nuer.
Yes, I am.
By tribe. How was that conversation? How was that? How did you process all that?
Well, it was more difficult, to be honest, because my dad had marks, the Nuer marks, the 6 marks, yes. And my sisters, they went to the POC because he was insisting that they should leave for him. He had a broken leg. He couldn't move, and he's like, I'm going to hinder you. He was living in Munuki, and you know how hot it was. So, and this is the part that I think I look at the positivity when it comes to tribes in South Sudan. We had a neighbor. This neighbor, he worked in custom with my brother. He happened to be a Dinka from Bargazal, and his mom is an Acholi. His name is Joseph. May his soul rest in peace. He passed on. So he was going to take his kids to Gure, his wife and his 2 children by then. But he couldn't leave my dad behind.
And your dad already he was immobile.
Yes. Yeah, and like his leg could not fold itself. So he had to put my dad at the back of his car, and he had to put his wife in front and his 2 kids. And when he was reaching these checkpoints, they used to stop him, ask him to put the mirror down, and he told my dad, no matter what, don't put any mirror or glass down and don't talk. Let me handle it. His local dialect wasn't really strong because he's one of those kids that grew up in the north, and several times they tried to get him open, the behind mirror, and he refused. He took my dad to his house in Gure. My dad stayed there for almost a week with him.
Where was your dad? Where was your house?
It was in Munuki. We were all neighbors. Like, basically, my brother's house and his house was just, a fence.
Separated by a fence.
Yes, separated by fence. So my dad stayed in his house in Gure. That was now his house that he was building with the family for 1 week until the conflict
subsided a bit.
Subsided. He also started working on my dad's traveling arrangements. He took him to the airport, and my dad was safely out because he was the only person with marks that we were worried about.
So by then, like, the marks were very clear, signifying the marks could actually be a visible threat, because other people would just say, like, okay, I know you're a Nuer.
Yes, by then. But there is this thing that people don't know. We have other tribes, especially from Upper Nile Dinkas also.
Yeah, but the Dinkas
they
have
the same
mark.
marks. It's just that they're different in numbers. But like for people who do not know, they can't actually differentiate. So, the conflict has its own negative and positive. But when my dad passed on in 2016, Joseph was one of the people who really got affected. He was crying and rolling on the floor. And that tells you that in South Sudan, we are not all tribalists. We have people who love South Sudanese genuinely, and they look beyond tribes.
Do you what like, when from that experience, has that kind of changed your view on tribalism a bit?
Well, I would say a little bit. I remember 2016, our passports were grabbed at the airport, because by then I had my firstborn, and then we were leaving. Some of the donors for my father-in-law, they got like, these flights for us to get evacuated. And I remember they came, grabbed our passport, and the person read Nyachangkuoth, and then went to my sister-in-law, Nyachangkuoth, and then he said something along the lines of, "You are Nuer, Riek Machar is spoiling the country, Gilakbat country, and you want to run away? We are all going to die here." He took the passports and left. We had to get one of the high senior advisors who actually came, took our passports, entered with us.
Escorted you to a plane?
Escorted us. She went with us up to the runway. And that is not the funny part. On the other side, some people had their own personal interests. It had nothing to do with tribalism. They wanted to put their families on those flights.
On those evacuation flights.
But also the pilots that we had were very savage, and they didn't give a damn. Some of them came all the way outside because they were told we are not there. And they said, "We are not taking anybody whose name is not on the manifest. We better go back empty."
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's very interesting. And you talk about your father-in-law. He's also a very accomplished gentleman, right? And someone that you worked with for some time.
Yeah, Reverend James is one of the great people that I ever met in my life, professionally and also at the family level. He is one of selfless South Sudanese who always look beyond their personal needs. They always put the community needs, South Sudan needs, at the local level, at the national level, as well as at the global level. He's an amazing man.
You worked with him for some time?
I worked with him, and I have learned a lot from him, and I'm still learning. And he's one of the people that if you meet him, your life changes. He's a man of principles, and he's very good at what he does.
What nature of work were you guys doing with him and the organization?
We were working on different thematic areas such as conflict, peace and conflict resolution, transitional justice. We also worked on natural resource management, food security and livelihood, as well as gender. And we have been implementing several projects, including the NAP 1325 in Lake State and also in Unity. And one of the key areas that really made impact within the society is the peace activities, the peacebuilding activities, whereby then, the conflict was really hot, but we were able to bring people from rebel control areas in Southern Unity State and also Eastern Lake State together for the first time since the conflict erupted. And also there was a reunification of families, because these were basically bordering communities who intermarried and lived with each other for so long until the conflict took place and insecurity came in. And other activities such as the peace caravan, whereby, we moved from one place to the other, like some no-go areas because of the conflict.
How was the process of bringing those two communities together who have not met throughout the conflict?
It was hectic. Some people got arrested. The mobilizers who were working, because we had to involve the leaders, at the states level, the two states. And by then, people were not in talking terms. Things were hot. It was tough. And then we had these chiefs from Lake State who came to the airport, and they were told not to leave. They are not going to Panyajar. And they said, we are going to walk.
Wow.
Yeah, one of these chiefs, we have Chief Andrew. He's a remarkable man from Lake State. And also from Southern Unity, we had also chiefs who said that these chiefs believed in us, and they said they're coming, their security is on us.
So the chiefs in the other community said they will secure these chiefs?
Yes. And we did an exchange learning visit. They went to Southern Unity State. We brought the chiefs and the community leaders and also the women from Southern Unity State also to Lakes.
Were they surprised when they visited the other community?
People were hugging each other. Some people recognized their family members that they didn't meet for quite some time. Some of them had wives and children from the other side.
But because of the conflict, they had to stay apart?
Yeah, because it wasn't safe. You can't cross to the other side, and you cannot cross and come to this side. And this is where you could see the humanity aspect beyond the conflict, beyond the destruction. You could see actually people are somehow, are naturally united and are related from within, but it's just the situation.
So you do that. And what about the peace caravan? How was it like?
So the peace caravan was about moving from one state to the other or from one county to the other with peace messages.
How was those peace messages displayed?
They were displayed in form of, having people from different counties, because by then we had to leave from Eastern Lake. We went to Maper. By then these states were divided. We had, I think, the 32 states and all that. Yeah. But the messages were around unity, around letting go of conflict, about localization and taking this initiative locally, because some of these chiefs were actually later got this position of being peace committees to take the initiative of peace locally, in a way that they said, we are from within the communities, we know what we want, we know what we need, we know how are the conversations, around conflict in our communities. We contribute. So it's our role now to build instead of contributing to violence. And later on, these messages were composed in a way that other demands came out of it. We want to sustain this peace. So some of these joint demands from these two communities, they said, we want a joint market. Yes, where we sell cows, where we trade, where we do fish. There was also an open area where they all meet. They say this is the area, and they chose that this is the area where we want to have a
physical
market.
Place.
Yes, and also they even brought some ideas around, wildlife, because there were some areas between Southern Unity and Lake State, and that area is full of different wildlife. So they were thinking also about livelihood activities that can bring the two communities together. Unfortunately, some of these ideas could not materialize, but we tried with the market, and it worked for quite some time.
The market started?
Yes, the market started. People started bringing their cows from Southern Unity State. But it was for a short period of time, because the dynamics and the context kept changing. Also, change of commissioners, governors. Yeah.
How much, these local actors, how much power do they have over peace and security? The commissioners, the chiefs?
Trust me, they have a lot of power. We normally underestimate that they can work as spoilers, and they can work as, peace builders. We had one of the chiefs, he had a nickname, a very tall man. When we had a peace conference, when the man entered the room, the whole place he stood and they started singing, greeting him, and you could know. And he was wearing, is it a leopard something on him. And also we had another Chief Andrew. His nickname is Magerger. You can't actually hear his real name. But we have spoilers. We have some of the traditional leaders. They call themselves spear masters.
Yes. They're almost like prophets.
Yes. There was this young prophet that really almost spoiled the peace efforts. He will shower you with milk as a youth, and he will tell you, you go, nothing will happen to you. Go and cattle raid, you will come back. Go for revenge killing and you come back. And he will point at other youth that I'm seeing you dying, don't go. And youth became so excited about this because like in few occasions, those predictions were happening. Violence predicted. We had youth not only attacking people from the other side, but from within the state. We had youth going to other places, such as Mayandid. We had, all this intercommunal conflict happening, and this is when we had to engage him. So also one of the strategies in peace building, it's important to engage spoilers.
How did you start engaging him?
We have, mobilizers. We have offices. We have mobilizers who are from within the community. And by then, let me say we had by then, because I'm no longer with the institution. Yeah, and they're from within the community and they're well respected. And that brings us to the localization aspect. When you're trying to do any efforts, whether peace building, localization is key. Having people from within the community who understand the language, who are well known, who people know where they live, it's important for building trust. So we had some of these people who really knew what they're supposed to do, and they were doing mobilization. But the challenge was this. Most of our activities, we have religious leaders from the church and we have these spear masters. So, it's everywhere in South Sudan. When you start an event, people have to pray. They didn't like that part.
They didn't like the prayer part, huh?
They said they're being undermined and their spirituality is being compromised.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I kind of understand. It's like bringing a Man U flag to a Chelsea fan. So they felt like, why are you talking to that God? We have our own thing.
Exactly. So
and how did you? Because Christianity is a very clear religion. It doesn't recognize all these things. How do you guys come through with this?
We had to find a middle ground.
So they pray there and then they also do their thing?
We were like, if you want to do your thing, go ahead and do it. But the challenge also, the main challenge was, in the States, most of the venues are churches.
So this guy comes with all his fears and he comes to the church?
Yes. Most venues were churches.
Were the pastors not also feeling a bit reserved about that?
Well, these are the things that you need to give up for peace. Having to accept other people and, how different they are and the activities that they do in their spirituality.
Some of these people are killers. They incited violence. They probably have blood in their hand.
Well, can we exclude killers in the context of more people are going to die? These are some of the balances that you have to make in the absence of justice system. And you are working, as a partner on peace building. What are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to exclude them? Because excluding them means more violence because they will continue practicing what they're doing. So it's also a tough call
to make.
Yes.
Was this work at any time dangerous to your life or to the life of the people you're working with?
It was, because security-wise, insecurity was there. You can be in the market and people start shooting. Because let me tell you, people are traumatized by the conflict, and it was those hard times, where you could see trauma in people. But it was worth it because after these engagements, you could actually see the good side of people, and people get to know you more in the work that you do. But as an organization, I would say there wasn't much threat. But, as it is the normal, like you are existing in hot zones, hot spots, by then for rebels and by then for the government before the peace. And of course you get accused that you are operating in both. So some people will be like, you are a rebel. On the other side,
was
your
like tribal identity a factor in that?
I would say tribal identity helped in a way to build trust. And this is when sometimes tribe is not really that bad, or tribalism, unless how we take it.
So if these guys are saying something, you speak to them in Tongnat? Or
weird enough, as a woman, when I was facilitating some of these dialogues, the first question they will ask you, who is your father? You tell them, they'll be asking you, are you married? The third question will be like, who is your husband? Because they want to familiarize themselves with where you come from. So if they don't know your father, they must know your husband. It's just also the gender dynamics, where in order for them to listen to a woman, you have to be married. They put it as a condition in order for you to have more weight and more respect, not as a girl, you know.
It's a very strange, but it's a very real dynamic.
It is.
How do you transition from that work into doing more work on policy and analysis, and kind of like a bit of abstracted nature of the work on conflict?
I think there is an advantage to that, because when you transition from some context that you actually have first-hand information to the policy level, you won't be Googling, you won't be talking about paper and reading and analyzing. These are contexts that you have lived in, contexts that you have experienced. The names are familiar. You see, pictures of people once they mention a name of a certain county or a certain place. So you can actually relate to the physical, the touchy-feely part of the work, not just at the policy level. So transitioning to that, I think it's an advantage, because you have some local background and you have some knowledge of how this work has been. For example, when you translate it to policy with the work that I do, if we start talking about the anti-GBV bill, when we start talking about the issues that are affecting women, I have been to Lake State. I did some peacebuilding work. I did some gender NAP 1325 work. At some point, I experienced the demands from women, because I remember when we did that conference, we had to do a women pre-conference separately in order for us to include women views in the main conference, even though we had to get one of the women leaders to go and present these.
Because it will be a bit difficult to have the women in that conference and have them express their views freely.
The women demanded, because they wanted a safe space. Because mostly the conference, you had chiefs, you had people in uniform, and most of these people are men. So the pre-conference was actually giving them that safe space, and after getting that safe space, they were confident enough. When we were in the main room, they said, as women, people look at us that, we can dance when there are some issues and occasions. Our work is to cook. We want to be part of the border committees. We want to be part of these peace committees. We want to be part of each committee, police committee. We want to be tax collectors. And as a result, we had some of these women. And when you look at it at the policy level, at some point, you have been all over South Sudan and maybe outside South Sudan into some community engagement levels, When you are sitting at the policy-making table, you know how a woman from Lake State felt. Because you have been, with them. You know how a woman from Lanya felt and what they brought to the table about participation. So as you're going through these documents and policy papers, you actually feel what these people need at some point. You don't know everything. You don't know all the things that they want, but you have been there and you can relate to the context. And to bring it back home also, you grew up within the community and the society, and that's an advantage.
So you currently occupy several, probably I can say high-level positions within the country. I mean, you sit in the political party council. You work with UNFPA as a gender analyst. But also you're part of several other discussions that are of important to the future of this country, whether it's national or the international level, you did and you still do a lot of consultation for the United States Institute of Peace. What do you think your power is in these places?
Well, first, I think it depends on
which positions.
Well, all I could say is that I am grateful. I might be one of the people who are lucky enough to represent and be in these spaces. Yeah. I feel like what I bring to the space, maybe my voice is not the only voice, but I bring a little bit of the expertise and the experience that I have. For example, I can't speak in specification about this different institution, but looking at how far I have come joining USIP, I think together. In 2017, we started as Generation Change Fellows. And from there, we transitioned, and there are different youth who are doing amazing things right now. And after that, I joined the Youth Leaders Program. In DC in 2018. Me and Amisio Joy, we were selected from South Sudan. And I have learned a lot of things, I get to experience sitting, behind a desk in an office, USIP office in HQ, and actually work with policymakers and some people that maybe I thought that I could only see them in TV. I saw President Bill Clinton. He was coming for the inauguration or something, launch of his wing. There was this new wing in USIP for George Bush and also for President Clinton. I never thought I would see President Clinton physically, yes. And continuation to that, I think I became the youth country liaison for USIP.
South Sudan.
Yeah, South Sudan. By then, 3 regions: South Sudan, Uganda, and Sudan. And after that, some other different engagements at a higher level and different events whereby I actually sat across table with presidents and influencers and decision makers. And I think,
because even in this country, you are sworn in. Your position was you're sworn in by the president, or by who?
Yes, by the
president.
By
the president. So the president actually pronounced your name.
No, he didn't have to pronounce my name because during, when you are being sworn in, it's you to pronounce your name. You'd be like, I, Nyachangkuoth. So it's you to say.
You. Yeah, but in the presence of the president.
Yeah, I shook hands with him after the ceremony. Yeah. And I told him my age. And I remember he said, do you know that the youngest member of the council was in, let's say, his late 40s or so. So you actually being the youngest person to assume this position ever, go and do the work. Yeah. And from his voice, I just felt like he hears about youth participation, the things that are being, and and I think he was directly saying, you represent the youth. You youth are saying you want to participate. Go do your part.
That's a huge responsibility, right? The political party council actually handles very critical issues.
Yes.
Including the registration fees for the political party, which is now up in flames.
No comment about that. Yes. This is what we do, our mandate here as a PPC.
Yeah. How is the reaction from your family when you assumed this position?
The first reaction, people thought I had a lot of money. Like, some people were coming asking.
Because it's primarily a volunteer position.
Yeah, it's a part-time. You don't have salary. Yeah, as a member. But people, being in their head.
I think it's a ministerial position or what?
Basically, it's like, I think so. It's equivalent to a certain, I think, is it undersecretary role or something like that. But they thought there is something called swearing-in allowance, and people kept saying, I said, yes, I was sworn in, I made the president, but it's not paid, but managing the expectations, I must say, it's a bit interesting.
It's a bit of a difficult process.
Yeah.
Trying to manage expectations from family,
friends, and yeah.
It's just a whole. What is your role at UNFPA? What does that entail?
I'm a gender and social inclusion analyst. So basically, the work that I do is around some of the activities related to mainstreaming gender activities, dealing with critical issues that are related to harmful cultural practices, and some other roles.
So it's a huge position, right, in terms of dealing with all this, in terms of the responsibilities?
Not really, but it's
critical.
Yeah, I could say you learn on the job, you come to some spaces thinking you know it all. If you come with that mentality, you are finished, because you keep learning every single day. And if you come with an open mind of willing to learn, you will learn a lot. And by the time you are leaving, going somewhere, you carry with you a lot of wealth in terms of just working with the colleagues around you, understanding the system, how things are being done, the processes, templates, writing concept notes, TORs, shaping them in a way, preparing agendas for meetings, and actually organizing events. Yeah.
So it's a lot of learning one still has to do.
Yes, a lot of learning, and I'm learning every day.
Yeah. What do you think are kind of the pressing issues in terms of gender in this country? Though there are many, what do you think some of the things that really comes to your desk and you're like, okay, you guys don't know this, or why is this happening still in this country?
Well, not in my desk as in generally, but speaking as a South Sudanese, I think most of the pressing issues are around policy implementation. Yeah, we have key bills and laws that need to be passed, like the anti-GBV bill.
What does the anti-GBV bill entail?
Basically, about laws, provisions on the protection of women and girls in so many different aspects, including survivors of sexual gender-based violence, and also having just a bill that protects women
specifically
and girls, and like other laws such as the family law, where you can actually look into details, issues related to child custody, issues related to polygamy, issues related to inheritance.
How is it governed right now?
Well, we have these bills and we have these laws that are...
So in the absence of the family law, how do people govern issues of inheritance? Is it rendered to the traditional courts?
Of course.
And which are clearly biased towards giving the men most?
Very biased. When I was working in Lake State, we had a woman who was put in prison by her family because she refused to be inherited by the brother-in-law. Wow. And the woman had serious concerns over, issues related to health, from the man's side. And people could not take it serious. Things such as, let me go and test with this man, or I don't want this man, or something like that. Inheritance still happens until today. I mean, even within our families, we have people who lost their husbands, and people are sending relatives, family members or relatives who lost their husbands and they're living abroad, and you find the in-laws are sending one of their boys to go inherit that woman. They even contribute and get a ticket for the person just to go and inherit that woman in Europe or in America. This is how bad it is. And when it comes to also issues of, custody, issues of, as a woman, if you go to Juba International Airport with a child, you're not allowed to travel with that child. Even with my kids.
The assumption is that without the father's consent, you cannot move the children anymore.
That you are stealing the kids. But the funny thing is, they tell you, we need the father to be there with his ID. If the father is not there, they tell you, we want the uncle.
Wow.
Who is the brother to the
So even if the father just says, just doesn't like you, say like you're stealing the kids, that's sufficient enough to prevent you from traveling.
The patriarchy went deep. I remember my mom was traveling with my niece, who is the daughter to my brother, and my brother wasn't around, and they say, okay, bring the auntie, the sister to the father. And my sister and I went. My sister didn't have her ID by then, and they asked me to sign. Wow. So also people value cows, bride price, even at the airport. It's mind-boggling.
What do you think of the issue of marital age?
Well, I think the Constitution makes it clear that any individual or a citizen who is below the age of 18 is a minor.
But the Constitution stops short of saying what is a marital age also, right?
Yes, but I think also that is why we're having a lot of this revision around constitution making process. I mean, like, I cannot talk about everything. I know in South Sudan we have people who are experts on constitution making process, experts on land issues, experts on livelihood and everything. But I believe these are some of the gaps that the constitution making process is trying to address, and also,
But currently, right now, are there a lot of girls who get married before the age of 18, right?
We have, because of so many reasons, these are just excuses that maybe people put, but I think poverty and also conflict and issues of economy hardship, as well as also some people are still so holding on into harmful cultural practices than the positive.
Do you think these people are including educated people?
Of course. What do you mean? Educated people come all the way, from a first world country to go and marry an underage. Educated people are the ones who are, sometimes competing with other people to marry young girls, Yeah.
Do you think the term, because we're about to conclude, do you think the term feminist has been, because I realize some people at times, they call someone, especially in South Sudan, they say you are a feminist as a mean to insult someone or to mean that you are some runaway cultural saboteur. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that term has become so contentious in our society? At least in section of our society.
Why did I know that you are going to head there? I mean, you had to set the ground and then come in for feminism. I think...
I'm not coming in for it. I'm just trying to understand. Because even for me, I say publicly, hey, I am a feminist because I believe this 1, 2, 3. At times people say terms like male feminist. I'm like, what do you mean male feminist? A feminist, just feminist. You don't need to...
you can be a feminist.
You don't have to qualify it. It's not a women only...
Yeah, it's not. I think the way it has been perceived, especially in the context of South Sudan, because when we come to talk about issues of women, girls, and let's say the society in general, you find people leaning to talking more about issues of women and girls, and it makes a lot of sense. Why? Because we are talking about decades of oppression, decades of, a girl being, removed from school and being married off in order for her brother to use her bride price to go to school. And then the same girl, when she grows and she reaches a certain age, let's say the same brother, not like, the direct translation of brother, but like people who their sisters had to be put in a situation where they had to sacrifice their future, and their dreams and ambitions for them, become and sit on the same table and call them, you are uneducated. You see? So it is too deep that feminism, basically, it's about fighting for equality, the rights of women and girls, equal access to opportunities, equal access to jobs, and fighting harmful cultural practices and norms in a way that women can be treated equally, and also women can voice how they feel without being shamed, without being stigmatized, without being stereotyped. But also the other aspect of feminism is being vocal about it, owning it and talking about it.
It's a very interesting thing, especially on the point of being vocal about it.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. Why do you think is that? Like the older women in our society, the older leadership of women in this country seems to be a bit at odds, or if not at different step of frequency with the kind of the younger generation, especially on this issue of being vocal about it, on your face, tell the men the hard truth.
I think I'm not trying to make excuses for the older generation, but the intergenerational gap is wide, yeah? We have our mothers who didn't know better, who were told how to sit, who some of them never had access to education. Some of them grew in the villages. They didn't know better, even deep down that they knew that they're supposed to be treated better or in a certain way. But all the situations surrounding them were not helping them to speak up and do things certain way. So growing into that becomes the norm, and as you are, raising your daughters, you will give examples of, do you think it was like walking down the aisle for me? And you find relatives, for example, when you face abuse in your marriage, they'll be like, you think you're the first one.
So do you think there are women who enforce some of these practices and work and make sure that it continues? At least not explicitly, maybe.
My research for my master's, I did my master's on governance and development in Antwerp University. And my research was actually, the title was Gender Inequality, GBV, Gender-Based Violence, Discrimination Against Women, and the role women play as enablers.
Wow.
And you will be shocked. I did data collection, focus group discussions, Unity State was included, Terekeke was included, Juba. My sample size covered these areas because Juba is like the capital city, and I wanted to have a better understanding of how things are, maybe from a privileged community, or let's say a setting where people are educated, and also a grassroots where predominated by cultural, norms. And I chose Terekeke and Unity, basically cattle keeping communities, But also this community lives within Central Equatoria, and the other community lives deep in the state. So like it was semi-urban, urban, and also village, like, different views. I interviewed women leaders, women in the market who are doing businesses, different UN agencies, civil society, feminist, faith-based, and also academia, people in academia, and different stakeholders. Majority of women I had people who collected data with me, and it wasn't like me collecting data by myself to go and write whatever that I want to write, And also we had a survey of a sample size of 385 interviews, whereby you find when you ask women and you be like, do you think women are enablers? Of course. The first question, I had a senior official who is a woman. When I asked that question, that do you think women contribute? She was like, of course. I would say 100 times that women contribute into pulling other women down, especially when it comes to leadership positions. And then they brought in the aspect of socialization. Yeah, we have men who are really enabling this culture of patriarchy.
Because the men tell the women,
yes,
the ideal woman
exactly.
should be like this.
Exactly.
So then probably if that is the model for success, or that's the model for what is called a respectable wife, a lot of women will also want to fit into that and make other ones.
And also make their children like their daughters, how they socialize them. You're supposed to sit like that. You're supposed to talk like that. You're supposed to cook this and that. If you don't know how to cook this and that, you're not a good wife, you know. And also it is the upbringing, the socialization, but also that is what the society and patriarchy has put into women's minds, yeah? It's always the men who are...
Do you think this statement of like, oh, whom will you marry? You will not get a husband. That's also means of enforcement, right?
Of course. And so many mothers, you know, tell their daughters that you won't get a husband. And unfortunately, I don't know, fortunately, growing up, I never heard such statements from my dad. When I was about to get married, my dad asked me, because by then I was a graduate, I was 24. And he asked me, are you sure you are ready to get married? It's not too early? And I was shocked. And he's like, you go think about it. So after another 1 month or so, he asked me again, are you sure you want to get married? And I said, yeah. Do you know the boy? Me, I know the parents, but I don't know these kids for East Africa. But like, even the day he handed me in church, he said, my door is open. I hear people saying that we do not have room for mutalagat. He said that in church in front of everybody. And it's like, every time, anytime you feel it's uncomfortable, it's not working for you, come back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nyachangkuoth Tai.
Son Kwaje.
This is definitely an interesting, deep kind of reflection on so many topics. Just thank you for your time, and I hope, and I'm sure that like many people will glean and learn so many lessons from this. And wishing you all the best in your work.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the day that you'll be on the other side, where we'll be asking you questions about hot things, like the things you post on social media.
The person
now you get people worked up.
My post and my personality are totally different. When you meet me in person, I as if that's not the same person that post. That's why I tell people, if you're reading my post, remember, if you know me in person, remember. Because it usually, I get a bit disappointed because a lot of people think I'm so hyper, I am what. But in person, I could barely raise my voice.
Well, it's the same thing. You see me on social media, posting memes, funny stuff. In real life, you just see a serious face that you will not understand. Who are you dealing with?
I think that's the survival mode for South Sudan.
I think this is what we need to survive.
Super.